Hey folks, Scott Weingart here, and this is an EMCrit podcast. Today on the podcast, we're going to discuss awake nasotracheal intubation. And I don't know why, but this was an itch I had to scratch. I wanted to do this episode. And in fact, it would make more sense if I did the oral intubation with a bronchoscope first. But I don't know, this was the one I had a hankering to get done. It took a lot of logistics searches. That's what this episode primarily is going to be about, is the logistics of awake nasotracheal intubation. And then on that show on the oral, that's when I'll go over scope movement and a lot of stuff on the actual performance of using a bronchoscope for intubation. I'll touch on that a little bit today, but that'll be saved for the next time in its majority. So today, really, nasotracheal intubation is a lot of logistics. It's a lot of getting stuff right before you ever get to the patient who needs it. And if you don't have that done, it's going to be a real pain in the butt. You're going to be really surprised at how annoying it is when you have a size 6 tube and you've finally found the cords, dropped your scope, and are ready to pass the tube and realize it doesn't come close to reaching, which, you have to discover that for yourself once on a really critical patient to realize you never want it to happen again. So that's what we're going to be dealing with a lot today. Before we get there, a quick plea. Folks, before we jump in, I want to tell you about an event that I'm trying to get off the ground with some of my friends. It's Awake and Aware 6. And I've participated in the last 3 of these, some of the best conferences I've ever gone to in the non-clinical space. We did it last year. It was the best ever. We all left that conference, all of the participants, all of the instructors, and said that was something magical. We had basically created a bubble. Our everyday lives had disappeared. I had spoken to people at a level of depth that I don't often get to do in regular life. It was just fantastic. The feedback was just across the board immensely positive. People said things like, my life had changed after that conference. But logistically, it was an enormous pain in the butt for my coaching partner, Rob Orman. He said, we're not doing this again. And I had spoken to one of the other instructors and said, I don't want to let this die. But it really is. It was touch and go throughout the entire pre-conference time as to whether we'd be able to sell enough tickets to support the conference, because it was very expensive and it was logistically a nightmare. But I didn't want to not have this conference again because it was just so valuable to all of the people who came, but to me. And so we're doing it a little bit different this year. We're doing it as a Kickstarter. And the Kickstarter is going on now. It will end a week from Tuesday. And in essence, if we could get 20 people, we already have 6. If we could get 20 people, then we're going to do the conference. And if we can't, then we're just not going to. We're not going to sign the contract with the hotel until we get those 20 people. So we'll know a week from Tuesday, August 26th. If you're listening on a different date than the release, we'll know. So this has to happen now if you want to get in. It has to happen now. And so it's an all or nothing type thing. Either we make our threshold or we don't. So let me tell you a little bit about it. This is going to be March 1st to March 4th, 2026. On the first day, we have some cocktails and meet and greet, then 2 full days of immersive experience, and then the morning to the afternoon of the last day. It's going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, because it's in the middle of the winter, and it's beautiful in Scottsdale in the winter. Not so much in the summer. What is the conference? This is a conference that will teach you to build joy in your life, to avoid burnout, to interact with all of the people in your life at the highest possible level, develop self-compassion, recalibrate your mindset, use philosophy for its intended purpose of making your life better and better every day. I can't even tell you what's going to be there because each year we change the curriculum, but it's going to be incredible from the perspective of non-clinical work, of making yourself happy on the job and off. And a lot of people who have come in previous years have brought their partners, even though those people are not doctors or nurses. It is just as applicable for non-medical people. And we have a bunch of pre-signups now who are non-medical. So what else do I need to tell you? You will get the conference, you'll get meals and CME. the hotel and travels on your own, but we hope everyone stays at this same resort because the idea is to create a bubble, just like a meditation retreat. It's not all meditation. There's a little bit of meditation, but it's not all meditation. But we want to create the idea of a meditation retreat where people's everyday lives fade away. In fact, I'm going to tell you, if you come, you probably should turn off your phone from the time you get there till the time you leave, because we want to create this bubble. And you will be interacting with myself and the other facilitators, Rob Orman, as mentioned, Ryan Cheney, who is a therapist, Erica Kreisman, another physician coach, and the four of us, along with you, will create this bubble. And you will love it, I promise. But it has to happen now. So if this sounds even vaguely intriguing, go to awake, so the word awake, Guidewire Coaching, that's all one word, Guidewire Coaching, like the Guidewire in a central line kit, coaching.com, awake.guidewirecoaching.com, and then just click the link at the top that says Kickstarter and sign up. And this has to happen before August 26th, which is like 8 days from now, or else it's not going to happen at all. So really, if you're like, oh, I want to do something non-clinical, I want to make my life better, but I don't want to do this, cohort course, I want to do it in person, then you gotta sign up. Please sign up. I don't want this not to succeed on the Kickstarter. And I should have mentioned earlier on, this is at cost. The cost for the Kickstarter, the price for the ticket on the Kickstarter, it's at cost. No profits for us, nothing. We bare bones as in every possible way just to see if we could get it off the ground. And then the tickets after the Kickstarter, they're going to be higher. So if you're interested, now is the time. Sign up, commit, make this happen. All right, I've taken way too long. I'm sorry. I normally don't do this. I apologize, but this just has to happen now. I'm sorry for the length of this. All right, we'll get into the show. Awake.guidewirecoaching.com. All right, let's get into the show. So I guess the first question is when to go through the nose rather than the mouth on a patient you plan on doing a bronchoscopic or fiber optic intubation on. Because for me at least, if the mouth is available, I'm going through the mouth. Now you can make arguments that it's it's a easier passage, it's a more direct passage. Once you pass through the nose, it's a pretty straight shot to the cords. Yeah. I just find I like the mouth better. I have a complete understanding of the anatomy. I know exactly what's going on there. I know precisely where I want to go with that scope. And so I will go through the mouth in almost every case. And even if they had like tongue swelling or what have you, if I could fit an endotracheal tube past, and as you'll see shortly in the show, I am a tube first type of player for both the mouth and the nose. If I could fit an endotracheal tube down past the tongue, then I'm going to go in the mouth. And I don't care how swollen that tongue is. And in almost every case, I could fit a tube past it. So the nose, for me, is really a fallback mechanism. And sometimes, even if I say, I don't know if I could get through that mouth or not, I might just drop a thin scope through the nose and take a look. Or drop a thin scope through the mouth and take a look and see, is there a passage that I could go through the mouth? And the reason is I see it from the other side. Once they're admitted to the ICU, I've played that game, and I just hate nasotracheal tubes. I love orotracheal tubes. I do not like nasotracheal tubes. They're a pain in the butt. And if I could avoid it, then I'd rather do so. Now, there might be some folks out there, they just like going through the nose. That's where their comfort zone lies. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not me. All right, so now we start getting into logistics. And the first piece of logistics is you should have a difficult airway cart. You should already have one of these. And it shouldn't be the cart you're using for your day-to-day intubation. For us, at all of the places I've worked, that's always been done out of a tackle box that comes up from Central Sterile. And we augment that with a video laryngoscope tower. So that was always our routine intubations. And we made sure everything we needed for routine was in those boxes from Central Sterile. It's a big fight, but getting bougies in there, getting the right laryngeal airway in there, getting scalpels in there. Once you do it, now you could do all of your airways just out of the tackle box and never have to break into an airway cart. That's what you should be going for. You should have your tube securing device if you can. Everything you want, just as you want it, in those tackle boxes. Then you need a difficult airway cart. And there's so much specific equipment for awake intubation of any sort, whether it's awake video laryngoscopic, whether it's oral bronchoscopic, whether it's nose bronchoscopic. There's so much specific equipment. You need a place for it. And if you could convince people to put the meds in there too, which we were able to do at some of my places, that is a real win. Because now everything you need, including the medications, they're all in one place. You can just open it up. Because if you already have a patient that needs a awake intubation, it means things are going kind of wrong for that patient usually. And so you don't want to spend time running around the department looking for stuff. So get an airway cart. And, this speaks to a real ethos you must embrace to separate yourself from standard emergency medicine and resuscitative emergency medicine. Resuscitationists don't improvise and they don't half-ass. While EM, it's not just something that's done, it's considered a badge of pride, right? It's a mark of distinction for how well you can MacGyver crap. But as my friend Laura McDuggan says, we shouldn't be half-assing in medicine. And what it really comes down to is we shouldn't be half-assing in resuscitative medicine because the stakes are high. So don't improvise, don't half-ass, have the right equipment for the job, don't try to jerry-rig things, and have it stocked somewhere you could find it instantly. All right, so now we're up to prep. And the first question is, which nostril? And what I like to do, if the patient's cooperative, is have them, or you could do it for them, occlude one of their nostrils and then listen to the inhalation and exhalation of the nostril that's not occluded, and then do the other side and see which one sounds more patent. Now, sometimes there doesn't really sound a difference between them. They're like, they're both pretty good. You can look at the external anatomy, but really, I found that doesn't really reflect what you're going to get behind. So having a deviated septum, as long as it's not too severe, doesn't really predict which nostril is going to be better. So if I can't tell from the breathing test, most times I will go to the right. And there's a meta-analysis linked in the show notes for this that demonstrates the epistaxis rates and the speed of intubation are both better on the right, all things being equal, right? There wasn't a clear preference, just go to the right nostril. Next, you have to decide whether you're a tube first player or a scope first player, by which I mean I am a tube first player. So I'm going to place an endotracheal tube just far enough back, basically to the level of the ear, the tragus, and then I'm going to scope through that tube. This allows me to place the tube and know it's going to fit before I get the scope down to the carina and then realize, oh crap, my tube is too big. I can't get it through without ripping off turbinates. So I am definitely a tube first player. Some people, they like to go scope first, and that's fine. But for me, even if I'm going scope first, I still don't like to scope directly into the nostril, and in which case I will place a nasal airway. And I'll talk to you in just a second about how to actually alter that nasal airway so that you could actually now still never have to navigate your scope through the various anatomy pieces of the nose. And I just find this markedly preferable. So I'm going to go tube first almost every time. If I'm not going to go tube first, if I'm going to go scope first, it's still going to be through a placed nasal airway. So the reason why you have to decide at this point is part of my prep for the patient is actually placing a nasal airway. If I'm going to go tube first, I'll just place a normal nasal airway and then I'll take it out. If on the other hand, I'm going scope first, then I want to slit my nasal airway all the way down its length. Now, the nasal airways I recommend are the adjustable flange nasopharyngeal airways. And I'm pretty sure that multiple manufacturers make these, but I've always used the cheapest one, which works just fine. And it's the SunMed adjustable flange nasopharyngeal airways. And most of the EDs that I've stocked these in, the standard airway size we stock is an 18 French. This is too small for the purpose that I'm going to describe here. So what you want to have in your airway cart is a 24 or 26 French. And the 24 French will allow will have an internal diameter of 6.0 and the 26 French 6.5. This is all in the show notes. But what these sizes allow is you to actually scope with a regular or narrow bronchoscope through the nasal airway. The 24 will take your standard and your thin, your pediatric bronch, through it, which means if I slit that, what I'm able to do now is scope all the way through the nasal airway, and since it's slit its entire length, I can just pull it up along the scope out of the patient's nose and just pull it off the scope, and then continuing the scope now past the entire anatomy of the nose. So these are great. The other reason I like the bigger ones, even if I'm not going to do that slit technique, is it matches the size of the tube I'm going to put. If I have a 24 French, and that means a 6.0 in essence endotracheal tube will definitely go. And so now I can put something soft and delicate, unlike the endotracheal tube, put it in and know I have the right size, and then switch it up for an endotracheal tube. I also use this to apply lidocaine ointment to the entire nasal passage, which is why I'm placing a nasal airway no matter which technique I'm doing, whether it has a slit or not. Now, if you're going to make a slit, you could use trauma shears, but it's a pain because the blade, often doesn't fit the orifice very well. So you're making these tiny little nips. On the other hand, if you buy what I've always stocked in my go bag, which is a hook knife, a strap cutter knife. I have a tiny one. I'll put the actual one I have in the show notes if I remember. And it folds up. It's like a folding knife. And then that allows me to slit nasotracheal tubes. It allows me to slit endotracheal tubes if I want to put something down the esophagus like a temp probe. It's gorgeous to have. You buy one, you have it for life. And so that's how I do it. I slit my nasal airway all the way down, and then I could use it for my application of nasal anesthesia. And then I could either scope through it or I could take it out if I'm going tube first. We've discussed what nasal airway. Let's discuss what nasotracheal tube you actually need. Now, the problem with your standard endotracheal tubes is in most product lines, in fact, almost all of them that I've seen, the tube gets shorter as their internal diameter size decreases. Now, in the ones that I am most used to, the Shiley range, the 8.0 and 6.5 are exactly the same length. The markings are smaller, or they don't go as high on the 6.5, but the actual tube length itself goes the same as an 8.0. And then it sharply drops off at a size 6, which are considered pediatric size. And the 6 is way too short for a nasotracheal intubation. It won't reach, especially in men. In the Ruche line, they get progressively smaller as each internal diameter size decreases. But for men, you need about 28 to 30 centimeters of tube to be comfortably below the cords. And for women, it's 26 to 28. I have a depth formula. I don't know if it's been particularly well validated. I have never used these. I don't care. I just get a long enough tube that it's going to reach almost anyone. What you want is you want to stock a 29 or 30 centimeter tube in sizes 6.5, 6.0, and 5.5. Those are the three sizes I want for nasotracheal intubation. Now, as I mentioned, at the shop I was at that had the Ruche, we didn't have to get anything special for the 6.5. They were long enough. So we just had to get a special 6 and a special 5.5. Now, Portex supposedly makes a 6.0 that's 29 centimeters. I've never actually bought it myself. This is just what I found during searching online. There's a Parker Blue line in which the 6 is a 29 centimeter and the 5.5 is 28 centimeter, which is probably okay. But what you're probably going to wind up doing, because this is what your anesthesia department's going to stock, is just stocking nasal ray tubes. I believe that's a manufacturer-specific name, but like Kleenex, everyone's just started calling all of these tube nasal rays. And what they are, they're incredibly long, but everything beyond 30 centimeters bends back on itself. And this allows you to tape the nasotracheal tubes to the patient's face for an operation. These are not great for the ICU. I particularly hate them. And what I will do is we just would take the ones the hospital stocked for anesthesia in size 6 and 5.5. And then when I actually went to use them, I just cut off the curve. So I'd have a 30 centimeter tube, I'd pull out the connector, I'd cut it off, and I'd put the connector back in all the way to its hub so that I knew it was tight and good. And that's how I would get a long enough nasotracheal tube, is just using the nasal rays. If you are just buying nasal rays on your own to order for your department, then you might as well buy the Parker Flex Tip nasal rays, because these, unlike that sharp triangular bevel, have a kind of like pointed, you'll have to look at it to really see what I'm talking about, but they don't hang up on the cords. They're really a delight. So if you're going to buy these yourself, you might just want to buy the Parker Flex Tip nasal tubes in size 6 and 5.5, and then just stock those. That would be fine as well. All right, then you want to choose which scope you're going to use. And at this stage of the game, I think you should be playing with disposables. The reusables are just such an enormous pain in the ass. And when you actually look at it long-term, the disposables are at least as cheap as the reusables. The reusables seem like a good deal up front, but then you realize just how unkind people are to these scopes and how rapidly they get destroyed and how many times you have to send them out for servicing, and it very quickly, when you also factor in the sterilization costs, it just becomes so much more worthwhile to buy disposables. And then you don't have to care. And then you can do crazy things like my friend Cliff Reed's technique of cutting the actual bronch. If you want to switch out an LMA or do like various things like that, you just don't have to care. You can do all sorts of easy stuff when they're disposable that you can never do with the reusables. So if you look at the Ambu line, and you should know by now, but I'll just say it just in case. I don't take money from any of these companies. I don't take money from the endotracheal tube companies, the scope companies, no one. We are clear of any conflicts of interest. All right, the Ambu regular bronch needs at least a size 6.0. Their large scope needs at least a 7, and their slim scope, their version of the PEDS bronch, needs a 5. What you want is as close as possible to the endotracheal tube size you're using, because then there's not a mismatch between the scope and the tube that leads to cord hang-up when you get down there. All right, now you're ready to actually start prepping the patient's anatomy. So you want nasal vasoconstriction. Now, classically, this was done with cocaine. And while this always sounded friggin' cool, it's like, yeah, I'm going to administer some cocaine now. It's really a pain in the ass from a protected controlled substance standpoint. And if you give too much, it's not good. And the head-to-heads I've seen, and none of these are good studies, they're not large enough, but they support the idea that something like an oxymetazoline or a phenylephrine, I don't think there's very much oxymetazoline out there. It's very much phenylephrine, at least in the consumer world, and I don't know what your hospital stocks. They both work. I've always thought the oxymetazoline works a little bit better than the phenylephrine. So if you could get that would be ideal. There have been a few head-to-head studies where normal saline looked just as good as oxymetazoline and cocaine. And when I've looked at those studies, you have to go way back. I think they're, at least 20 years old. When you look at them, they're just underpowered. I don't think normal saline's as good. The point estimates were always better for the cocaine and the oxy. It's just that they didn't have enough numbers. But the oxy looked as good as the cocaine. And so I think what you're going to just do is whatever your hospital's version of, this is what we call it in the States, Afrin is, just use that. Don't go searching the cocaine and don't use normal saline. Maybe normal saline actually works for the same reason neti pots work, and it's not a placebo. It's actually an active substance on the nasal mucosa. That's possible too, but whatever. Just don't be squirting saline up there. Just go with whatever nasal vasoconstrictives you have. Now, honestly, I don't think it makes that much difference in terms of the epistaxis rates from the studies I've seen, even if you gave nothing. So if you can't find anything, obviously don't delay the intubation. Antisialagogues, should you give them? If you have time, you should. Now, glycopyrrolate IV takes 7 minutes to have really any onset and 15 minutes to see full effect. So if you have the time, then you could give 5 micrograms a kilogram, or if you're not going to remember that, anywhere between 0.2 and 0.4 milligrams, and you'll probably get better topical anesthesia because, it's just more absorption because of less moisture. Let's talk airway anesthesia. Now, the problem with airway anesthesia is there is a narrow window between the latency time, that's from the time of application to actually having effect, and when the topicalization actually wears off. And if you're using high potency products, which last longer, then the latency time is generally 2 minutes, and the duration of full action is about 15 minutes. So you don't have a ton of time. It's enough if you have all your equipment ready and you're good to go, and it is not if you have to go searching for things. So you want 4% lidocaine, and you want 4% liquid lidocaine for atomization, and then you want lidocaine ointment 5% as minimums. And if you don't have these, just get them. Have your pharmacy order them, say we need these, and get them. What you want to do is you want to spray the nose with the 4% lidocaine. And you're going to spray along the floor of the nose, because that's the path you're going to take for these tubes. And you want to try to time them, if you can, with the patient's inhalations, because now the patient's actually going to help get these down to the periglottic regions and maybe some even below the cords, and that would be good, right? That makes for less coughing when you actually put a tube down there or your scope down there. So that would be the ideal. And I'll generally put 8 or 10 cc's into the atomizer. And for the atomizer, it has to be an atomizer. Nebulizers, and George is going to get pissed off at me, they do work, but they work very poorly compared to atomizers because the particle size is too small. So what you want is either an easy spray or a MADGIC, M-A-D-G-I-C device. And the MADGIC is a little cheaper, not much though. And the Easy Spray is just super cool because you put an oxygen tubing on that, and then as you push the button, it just puts this like jet spray of atomized lidocaine wherever you want it. With a tip, you could actually adjust to point straight ahead or down. It's great. And that's the ideal that you want to stock, is these Easy Spray devices. So you're going to get 10 cc's of the 4% with that. Then I'm going to take that lidocaine ointment and put it all along a nasopharyngeal airway, as mentioned earlier.